New three-dimensional simulations show Venus's giant rift valleys expanding by 3 to 10 centimeters a year, fast enough that some of the planet's most dramatic surface scars could be actively growing right now, not just fossils from a billion years ago. That is the finding from a team at ETH Zurich, published in the journal Nature Geoscience, and it directly challenges one of the most confidently held assumptions in planetary science: that Venus is a geologically dead world, its surface frozen in place for hundreds of millions of years. If these rifts really are still opening, Venus joins Earth as one of only a small handful of rocky planets in our solar system still actively reshaping its own crust today. That is a bigger deal than it sounds, because how a planet's interior behaves shapes everything from its atmosphere to whether it could ever have been habitable. Let us sort the signal from the noise. Venus's surface is covered in enormous rift valleys, cracks in the crust that can stretch for hundreds of kilometers, similar in concept to the Great Rift Valley splitting East Africa here on Earth. For decades, the standard interpretation was that these rifts were ancient, carved hundreds of millions of years ago during a more geologically violent period in Venus's history, then left to sit largely unchanged ever since. That reading fit a broader picture built from spacecraft data going back to NASA's Magellan mission in the early 1990s, which showed no direct evidence of current volcanic eruptions or shifting plate boundaries the way Earth has, without new eruptions or moving plates to point to. Most planetary scientists settled on Venus as a world whose interior had gone quiet. Its dramatic surface features essentially fossils rather than living, changing structures. That consensus held for roughly 30 years. Not because nobody questioned it, but because nobody had a good tool for testing rift age directly from orbital imagery alone. The ETH Zurich team, led by Professor Taras Geria, built the first high-resolution three-dimensional models of how Venusian rift flanks, the raised ridges running alongside a rift valley, actually form and evolve over time. The key insight is that a rift's flanks behave differently depending on the rift's age. Young, actively opening rifts produce wide, steep flanks, because the crust is still actively stretching and has not had time to settle. Older rifts, ones that stopped moving long ago, gradually subside and flatten out, their flanks eroding into lower, gentler slopes. Armed with that distinction, the team compared their simulated flank shapes against real orbital measurements of Venus's actual rift valleys. Multiple rifts across the planet showed the wide, steep flank profile the models associate with recent or ongoing activity, not the flattened profile expected of billion-year-old scars. The simulations further estimated these active rifts could be widening at 3 to 10 centimeters a year, comparable to how fast some tectonic features move here on Earth. If this reading holds, it does more than update one line in a textbook. Venus and Earth are similar in size and bulk composition, often called sister planets, yet they ended up radically different. Earth habitable and geologically active. Venus a scorched, crushing hothouse with a surface hot enough to melt lead. Part of how scientists explain that divergence has rested on Venus's crust going geologically quiet, losing the internal heat engine that drives Earth's plate tectonics in. Some researchers argue, helps keep our planet's carbon cycle in balance. And actively rifting Venus complicates that story. It suggests Venus's interior still has enough churning heat to visibly deform the surface today, closer to Earth's ongoing tectonic behavior than the frozen, one-time event most models assumed. That matters for missions currently being planned to study Venus, including NASA's Veritas and Europe's Envision orbiters. both of which will be able to directly test this claim by measuring surface changes over time in ways no past mission could. Here is the limitation worth sitting with. This finding comes entirely from simulations matched against existing orbital imagery, not from direct, repeated measurements of the same patch of Venusian ground actually moving over time. Nobody has watched a Venusian rift widen in real time. The 3 to 10 cm a year estimate is a model's inference from flank shape, not a directly clocked speed. Flank shape as an age indicator is also a relatively new technique, tested and validated primarily through this same research group's own modeling, and it has not yet been cross-checked extensively by independent teams using different methods. Alternate explanations for wide, steep flanks beyond recent rifting have not been fully ruled out either. The strongest confirmation would come from a mission like Veritas or Envision actually detecting fresh surface changes, and those missions have not launched yet, meaning direct verification is still years away. Treat this as a serious, well-argued challenge to the dead Venus consensus, built on solid modeling, but not yet a confirmed fact about what Venus is doing right now. Quick recap. New 3-dimensional simulations from ETH Zurich, published in Nature Geoscience, found that some of Venus's giant rift valleys show flank shapes matching recent or ongoing tectonic activity, potentially widening 3 to 10 centimeters a year, challenging the decades-old assumption that Venus is geologically dead. So, signal or noise, leaning signal, but with a real asterisk. The modeling is rigorous, comes from a credible planetary science team, and directly tackles a specific, testable question with a clear methodology. But it is inference from surface shape, not a direct, repeated measurement of Venus actually moving. And the strongest confirmation is still years away, waiting on missions that have not launched yet. This is exactly the kind of finding that deserves attention now and a second look once Veritas or Envision actually gets there. Until then, call it a compelling crack in the dead planet story, not yet a rewritten one. Subscribe for space stories that separate the real discoveries from the headlines chasing clicks. Signal from the noise. Every week.